everyone. Thank you for joining us again for the Wayne Public Library Jazz Virtual Series. And today I am very honored and pleased to have a conversation with the great jazz pianist and composer, Isaiah J. Thompson. So thank you for joining me today.
Of course, thank you.
So let me just be the one of the first in person, virtually, to congratulate you on the announcement yesterday of the Jazz Journalists Association. You're the up and coming musician of the year for 2024. So very incredibly deserved, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
I
it.
was very excited to see that.
Yeah, I had no idea. Yeah, that and it came out of nowhere. So I was very honored. Yeah.
So you came onto my radar when I had the chance to see you perform with John with his trio in Pauling, New York in November 2021, and then in getting to know Kellen Cardello and following the American Piano Association competition.
Mhm.
I'm also happy to announce that you were the winner of the 2023 American Pianist Award and the Cole Porter Fellowship in Jazz of the American Pianist Association. So congratulations for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
You competed against many of your friends that you grew up with at Jazz House Kids and at the Calderon School as well, or
I
where
met
do you
all of
know
them.
them from?
Right. Yeah, I met most of them at Jazz House Kids or after that. Yeah, or after that, I think just being around in New York and things like that. But yeah, a lot of my friends were in at Jazz House. Yeah.
Is it awkward to compete against your friends?
Um, that's a good question. I from the beginning um said I made it a point that I'm not a competitive person. I've never been that way. And I always went out and just said I'm going to play my best. And I think one thing that I realized this last time, as opposed to maybe other competitions that I've been a part of, so I think I was just a little bit older, and um, I realized it wasn't up to me. It doesn't matter how I play. This is truly just what I believe. I mean, I didn't feel that it mattered how I played, or my only responsibility was to play the best that I could in that moment, and then it wasn't up to me. So I didn't feel particularly weird about anything because I didn't feel like I was in competition. Really, I just played the best I could. That's all I could do. Yeah.
I believe the other finalists also feel the same way, and we're happy for each other to even just be a part of it and have the same humble and gracious viewpoint of it was just a pleasure to be there and also to be among five great pianists in that competition.
That never happens. That's one thing I've said from the beginning is that I mean, pianists, we don't get to hang out a lot. That doesn't happen. There's saxophonists and brass play, like they get to hang out a lot because there's more than one of them on a particular gig or performance or something like that. Pianists, we never see each other, unless we go to each other's performance. So for us to all be in a room, I hadn't seen a lot of them in a long time, and especially all of them at the same time, that had never happened. So to be gathered, that was a really special thing for especially for over that period of time, for that length of time, for us to always be together and be able to communicate and talk to each other and learn from each other. I think it was really, really special.
So, some other awards that you have been the recipient of, you were the 2018 Lincoln Center Emerging Artist winner of their award, and you were in second place in the 2018 Thelonious Monk, which is now the Herbie Hancock Institute of Jazz International Piano Competition Award. So, congratulations for that, too.
Thank you.
So, you grew up in West Orange. And
Correct.
so that must have been a wonderful exposure to music just in this area. And then, of course, being in proximity to New York City and all the great schools.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, your parents, from interviews that I was watching, your parents are a great influence on you. And it sounds like they expose you to a lot of different things, including fencing, which I found interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was well, that one I remember in high school I was thinking about I want to do a sport, and I went to a few meetings for different sports, but some of the schedules just didn't align with what I was already doing with music, and I was already involved with Jazz House Kids and things like that. And some of the contact sports, it made me nervous just because of my hands, and I didn't want to be injured in a certain way, So um, I remember seeing they kind of did like a demonstration, uh, just to like let people know that it was available, that they had fencing at the school. I went to school at Montclair Kimberly Academy, so they had fencing, and I saw that, and I said, "Oh, that's actually really interesting." And yeah, I just somehow it ended up happening, and somehow it ended up working out, and I was able to do that, and also continue to play, and I really enjoyed that time in my life for sure. Yeah.
Do you still have a rapier somewhere in your closet?
No, what do I still have? I still have my mask, but but that's about it. Yeah.
So we were talking about your hands, and in one of the interviews that I watched, it came up that during COVID you had injured your hand.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, during it was right before COVID. I had dealt with some injuries with my arms. So um yeah, that was a really hard time, but I'm actually really thankful for what it did. It humbled me, and it made me very appreciative of just having the ability to play at all and to know the worth of playing. When something super important to you is taken away, you start to reevaluate your priorities. And yeah, it's kind of hard. It's really very hard when it's happening to you, but as time went on, I started to see how it helped me. So yeah.
It's very easy for us to take things for granted, especially at a younger age. And when something unexpected happens, you're right, it causes a reevaluation. So,
Yeah.
um, and I'm wondering if it also, with your compositions, did it affect? And I don't know how to phrase the question, but did it affect you in your composition? Because now that you maybe were not able to use your hands, were you composing then mentally and in another fashion? Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I was someone who always believed in also being able to practice away from the instrument, and really think about things. I think definitely having a philosophical standpoint into music is super important. So that's something that I had always kind of thought about. Like, how can I just be better? How can I think about it, as I'm, on the train or whatever? Like, how can I prepare for whatever it is that I have to do? But yeah, that might have definitely also reminded me of how important that is. And very much prioritizing, like I was saying earlier, just making sure when I do sit down at the instrument, it's important time that I'm spending, because now I can't sit here for hours and hours and hours. So it definitely made me really concentrate some more.
It's amazing looking at your schedule. Your tour schedule is exhausting, and not just for the amount that you're doing, but from state to state to state to state, and then back to another state, and then you're back on the East Coast, and all of a sudden you're in Michigan, and like it's crazy. And I just took note that so you just performed a few days ago in New York City with the American Pianist Association with a quartet. On May 10th, you were performing with John Pizzarelli and Catherine Russell in Connecticut, and then you flew to Minnesota, right?
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
you'll be at the Jazz Forum in June, at the end of June, and then in Birdland in July and August. And next Saturday, no, this Saturday, you're going to be in Bethel Woods, New York.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like it's dizzying. Literally,
Yeah.
it's dizzy Gillespie dizzying to look at your schedule and just see the travel that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be a lot. It could be a lot of times. Yeah. But I'm thankful. I'm thankful. Uh, this music, it can be tiring, and it requires a lot out of you. Um, and just to have the opportunity to do that, to perform for someone, to hopefully make someone feel better, when they leave, than when they came in. I always say that's just an extraordinary opportunity, but you have to be prepared to give your all, in those circumstances.
It's an emotional and physical offering that you as a musician give to the audience. And when the alchemy works on the stage between the musicians, and you're feeding off each other, and then you're feeding off the audience member, as an audience member, it's magic. It's really magic, and it will move me to tears. I find it such a special thing when it happens.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It really is a special week. The bandstand, we say, it's a sacred ground.
Yeah. Now you studied and got your bachelor's and master's at Juilliard.
Correct. Yeah.
And are any thoughts of getting any further degrees or
Now, that's a that's a
in your
funny
free time?
that's that's a very good question because I actually recently enrolled just to get a well, I got some sort of I enrolled in a seminary, and so I'm getting like a sort of smaller degree at seminary. So that's really what I've been working on. But that's a really specific question because that was a very recent development. you know? So yeah,
I don't know how you're going to fit in your schedule, but
yeah,
some make it work.
we're working on it. Yeah, we're working on figuring that out. Yeah,
So I wanted to talk a little bit about your compositions, and you have several different CDs. So let's just work backwards. Your most recent CD is a Giraldi Holiday that came out prior to Christmas, which I downloaded it the day it was available, and I've been listening to it ever since. I am a huge Vince Guaraldi fan. His music really speaks to me. In fact, I have about 10 or 12 of his albums, and those with and I hope I pronounce this right, the guitarist Bola Sete.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I just love his music, and of course, I grew up. I am the generation that grew up with the Peanuts, and the subtle indoctrination of an entire generation in jazz, which is
Right.
wonderful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, my parents, especially my mom, she really loved that, and so she exposed me to that from young age. So yeah,
So when you did all the arrangements for that, correct?
correct, correct.
So in listening to it, I'm a big fan of unusual time meters that are not conventional.
Sure.
And if I'm, tell me if I'm right on this, but Christmas time is here is 5/4.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you know what's funny? I generally am not someone who does that. I that was for whatever reason, I really wanted to personalize the way I hear these compositions, and I never really want to change something that I feel really if it's going to take away really from it. And so for whatever reason, I remember playing that song like every Christmas, time or holiday time, and eventually I was like, it kind of works in five. I still feel the spirit of the song, and some people have been very upset about it. Some people have been very happy about it, and I just part of me also just I love listening to the way that Giraldi played it. And I was like, I'm never gonna play it the way that he play. I mean, it's just so perfect listening to him play it the way he did. And I just felt it in this different way. And I wanted to do it that way. But like I said, that hardly ever happens. For me at least personally, yeah.
I'm going to encourage you to explore more of it because it's struck me immediately, and I'm like, this is it. This is fantastic, and I absolutely love it.
I'm glad. I'm glad.
There's another pianist who we had perform here at the library a couple of years ago named Lawrence Hobgood, who
Okay.
he loves also unusual time meter, and he does straighten up and fly right in seven,
Okay.
which
Okay.
is really fun, really
Right.
really fun.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that song. Yeah.
Now, is there on Little Birdie? It features a wonderful vocalist named Tyreek McDowell,
Yeah.
and we actually had the pleasure of hearing him perform with Kalen Cardello and Johnny Giddings' big band in March. He was a featured guest, and his voice is smooth as silk, and he's a Sarah Vaughan competition winner, and
Yeah.
his trajectory is going strong. So I was
Yeah.
really thrilled to hear him on that.
Yeah. 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 He did so well. I didn't really even tell him much. I said, I want to do this song, and he was just like, great, and he had listened to it, and he knew what I was. He already knew what I was talking about, and we didn't have to say much about it. I remember being in the studio, and we were going to start it like kind of how Giraldi did. It starts with the bass line, and he was just kind of like in the back, and he was kind of singing it to himself, like singing the bass line, and we're like, well, why don't we just do that? And that's how it ended up starting, because he's just a musician at his core. You can just kind of feel it. He's always playing something. He's playing drums, or he's singing, or he's playing trumpet or something, whatever. He's just such a musician. So yeah.
Even in the concert, he's picking up the percussion instruments and just, I mean, he's all over the place. And I'm like, does he do, is there anything he doesn't do? Like,
I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think so. Yeah.
who sings on Christmas Time is Here? Excuse me, not Christmas Time is Here, excuse me. Chestnuts roasting on an
Oh,
open
Robbie
Christmas
Lee.
song. What is his
Robbie
name?
Robbie Lee. Yeah, Robbie Lee is an absolute amazing vocalist and pianist. And he has one of my favorite trios in the world. And he is extraordinary. I mean, that's all I can say about him. He's just so great. And I just respect his musicianship so much. And what he's able to do is so unbelievable to witness. And he can really play and really sing. Yeah.
His voice is very velvety, and if I were on autopilot listening to that song, I would have actually assumed it was a different version of Nat King Cole's.
Right.
There's so much similarity of his voice to Nat King Cole's, and I mean that in the greatest compliment ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and it really kind of stopped me for a second. I was like, wow.
He sounds like he could just be one of those great, you know, from that time. And he is just great, great vocalist. Yeah, unbelievable.
Well, I look forward to exploring more of his music.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to hop into just the fact that you worked on the um, soundtrack for Motherless Brooklyn, the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
That book, by the way, is one of my favorite books by Jonathan Lethem. And as a
Okay.
librarian, yeah, I'm always trying to recommend it to people. And then it took many, many years for the movie to come out because of people coming into the project and then it being dropped. And luckily, Edward Norton kind of stuck through it. But you not only are on the soundtrack, but I believe you're also on the screen.
Yeah. 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 That was such a wild experience. I really did appreciate how much Ed Norton wanted us to be involved, and he really spoke to us as musicians. Like he was really um he's really spent time with us to explain to us what he wanted, and he was open to receiving ideas from us. That was a really special opportunity, because that doesn't always happen, where we as musicians get to be really involved with sort of the making of. I really enjoyed that time. Yeah.
It's a great soundtrack.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, and of course, Winton is just such a genius, So that was an extraordinary opportunity. Yeah.
Well, to make that that classic noir sound, but make it fresh, right? It
Right.
really is something very special. And yeah, it's a great soundtrack.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Now you've one of your CDs is with the Jazz at Lincoln Center with Wynton Marsalis called "Handful of Keys," where you're playing 100 years of jazz piano. What was that experience like?
Yeah, that was yeah, I guess that was yeah. That was 2017, I think. And yeah, that was nerve-wracking. So I remember it being nerve-wracking. I did not know that it would end up being on a recording. So that at that time I didn't know that. So I think that took off some of the pressure. Had I known it was going to be a recording, I don't, you know. But that was really special. I grew up around Jazz Lincoln Center. I was in the youth orchestra when I was in high school, and they were all the people in the orchestra were such mentors and teachers to me at different times. So to get the opportunity to perform with them uh, was really amazing and affirming in a sort of way. And but also, like I said, it's very nerve-wracking, you know. But I learned a lot with a lot of other pianists there at that time that I get to learn from and listen to, and that was really also really special. Yeah.
So you said that was 2017. So I guess the next recording you had was your EP of the Isaiah J. Thompson Trio.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, that that was super funny. I think that just I didn't plan that one either. I kind of we were playing uh at a club called At Exuberance in Philadelphia, and yeah, we just played, and eventually we're like, you know what, maybe I should do something with this. And so it ended up being just a short EP, and I had no idea that I'd still be talking about it this many years later. But I'm pretty happy with my decision to do that.
I think that we're seeing a kind of thread here that the things that you're not planning on, maybe you
Right.
need to do more of that. To plan less, spontaneous
Right.
more, and just see where things go because they all turn to gold.
Right. Right. That's funny. Absolutely.
So in 2020, you have a CD play where you play the music of Buddy Montgomery,
Right.
the brother of Wes Montgomery, right?
Correct. Correct. Yeah. I Don Sickler really put me on to Buddy Montgomery's music. He definitely um not someone that I had heard about, and especially when I started listening to his music, I'm like, how come no one's telling me about this person? And this is amazing writing and just all that he's able to do on the instrument is so. I think I remember talking about how R&B influenced it is, but in my opinion, it's just so very much still jazz. It's you know, and just the way that he constructs ideas and is so special, and it helped me in my writing, I think too. So I was so happy to record his music. I learned a lot in that process.
It's a wonderful CD. I was able to hear parts of it, and yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was hard too. It's really hard. But yeah.
Now in 2021, you have a CD called Composed in Color.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was super excited to get some of the special guests that I had perform on. Joe Farnsworth played, and Kenny Washington played, Christian McBride played, yeah, and then it was me and Philip Norris and TJ Reddick. We were all playing, and it was just great to have all these people in there and get to record some of my favorite songs. And uh, yeah, that was. I remember just being nervous about. I had picked, I didn't pick particularly easy songs either, which in the moment when you're thinking about it, you're like, this is great. Then when it comes time to play it, you go, oh yeah, I chose this. And yeah, I that is also something that I didn't know would end up being talked about later on. And a lot of people have really loved High Fly, which I didn't know that would happen, but they said that they love listening to High Fly. And we play it a lot actually now because people have told me that.
I think you need to just accept that everything you've done, we're all going to be talking about.
You're right. Well, I'm appreciative, very appreciative.
So not only did you come out with a Giraldi holiday in December of 2023, you came out with another CD earlier that year, which is The Power of the Spirit.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a beautiful, beautiful album.
Thank you very
Really beautiful album. And tell me a little bit about how that came to be. I don't think that was quite as spontaneous. I think it was a little bit more planned, right?
Well, in some ways, in some ways, well, it's a live recording. So, um, I think one of the things that happened was I knew that I wanted to have some sort of documentation of what I had been performing, and we had been playing that music for some time, for a number of years, and I was kind of in this space where I felt like going into a studio to record it in that way might not serve the purpose for which I saw the music at that point because we've been playing it for so long. And I became aware that there were recordings of us playing it, already playing it live, and I thought that those would best represent that time that I spent on those specific compositions. And so, yeah, like when we played when it was being recorded, I didn't know that it would end up being used, in that way. But we ended up doing that, and yeah, I was really, really proud of what it ended up being. But yeah, it goes into your same thesis is becoming more and more apparent.
I will have to touch base in about 5 years and see if it can, if this thesis of mine is played out in such a way,
Right.
and we'll touch base in 10 and 20 and just see where we're at.
Right. Right. Right.
Now, when you performed for the competition with the American Pianist Association, there's a song that you performed called "A Prayer."
Sure.
Is that recorded on any of your CDs?
It will be very soon. It will be very soon.
That is a, it's, I have to say, it's my favorite song of yours
Oh, wow.
for the very reason it's a ballad, it's contemplative, and it reminds me of, so the things that bring to mind are, Monty Alexander has a song called "The River," which
Okay.
also is a very meditative piece to me. A prayer is that as well. Oscar Peterson's "Hymn to Freedom," which you've also performed wonderfully. Um, it just, you touch into something that jazz is wonderful because you can be excited, you can be joyful, you can be sad, the blues, right? But it could also be in this almost a spiritual, meditative quality where you can just relax and kind of go with it. And a prayer really struck me that way.
I'm glad. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always like to hear what touches people. That's something I wrote. I can't remember what year that was, but I just ended up. Yeah, I was just playing it, and I remember my teacher at the time walked in, and he was like, "What is this?" I was like, "Oh, it's something I'm working on." He's like, "Keep, finish it, and it has, yeah, become something that I've played more and more. And I was lucky enough, like you said, spiritual. I was lucky enough when in high school to play Duke Ellington's sacred music with the Jazz Lincoln Center Youth Orchestra, and we had like 300-piece choir and the whole thing. And I remember playing Duke Ellington's Reflections in D, and this was at Carnegie Hall. And I just remember just being, alone in front of all those people, and there's already so many people just in the ensemble, and then there's so many people who came to see all of us students. And so I just remember the impact of that and learning Duke's that piece is such, it's so contemplative, and you really, it makes you think, and it moves people spiritually, in my opinion. And when I was writing a prayer, is something I had in mind.
Reflections in D is also one of my favorite songs, and that the pianists that I am always been most drawn to are Oscar Peterson, Monty Alexander, Duke Ellington. Because there is that almost that classical sound that comes along and comes through their music. To me, WC you can hear actually quite a lot, or that's what my ear hears.
Right.
Um, so Duke Ellington and you share a birthday. So which was just not too long ago. So April 29th, happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
So I'm curious with your influences. I understand that Nat Adderley was one of your earlier influences, or of a show that you that kind of ignited that spark.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Now Adderley Jr., he lived across the street from me. So when I was growing up, so they were kind of just the families were around. And yeah, I got to see him perform a number of times. And especially when you're young, jazz is not, not the popular music. You're not hearing that in middle school and all these things. So I remember hearing him play at a club and being like, okay, what is this? I never heard I didn't know what jazz was, that wasn't being talked about. I grew up listening to my parents, they listen to a lot of R&B music, listen to gospel music. So that's what I grew up listening to. So the more and more I started to become exposed to jazz, I was like, what is this? And I started to become very interested in it. So that was helpful. And then I had a great teacher named Bob McCullough who would come over my house and he showed me these different recordings, whether it was whatever it was spanned a lot of things, Stevie Wonder, Herbie Hancock, all these things, Earth, Wind and Fire. And we just go through these songs and I started to learn about chords and all these things and blues, like what does the form of a blues look like and how do the chords work and how do they move? Um, and that led into me becoming more involved with these programs, NJ Pack, Jazz for Teens, Jazz House Kids. Yeah.
I'm curious if Gene Harris was an influence on you, much like you said with Buddy Montgomery, where you expressed, "How come no one showed me this before? Why express?" I stumbled on Gene Harris probably about 15 years ago. I was like, why hasn't anyone shared his music? And it's so exuberant, that gospel. He just breathes so much life. It might as well be spring is one of my other favorite songs, because you can't help but not feel happy and smile. But he has a lot of that gospel, and I'm just curious if he influenced you.
Sure. I mean, I remember early on hearing him play Summertime, that arrangement he has, and Ray Brown, and just yeah, like you said, this sound that him and Monty, they get this sound out of the instrument, of course, Oscar, just the sound that they get so big and it's joyous, and yeah, I just remember hearing the way he plays the blues and it's just so drenched in the experience and in that experience of the music. Yeah, for sure. For sure. It influenced me.
Now, Harold Mayburn was also an influence on you, correct?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I wish I got to, I'll never say that, I know friends of mine have really spent so much time or got the chance to spend a lot of time with him. I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him, but the times that I did were special. I remember, sitting with him and having a lesson for like a few hours and he would just stay. He would say, as long as you have questions, we'll stay, and after we finished the lesson, we walked, we walked. He was like, yeah, I'm gonna walk like a mile down. He was just on the go and he was such a beautiful spirit and he would come every once in a while. He would come and sit behind me while I was playing at whatever club it was. That was super intimidating, so but he was always so generous, really generous. A lot of musicians that I've met, if they see that you care about it, they're very generous with their knowledge and their time.
To the case in point, Christian McBride, Bill Charlap, very generous with their time and their knowledge. And like you said, if someone is showing an interest and wants to develop, they're wonderful mentors. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah, absolutely.
I believe that Kalen Cardello had the last class with Harold Mayburn.
Yes, he told me. Yes, he told me.
It's a pretty amazing thing.
It is.
So on Power of the Spirit, you have a song for Phineas Newborn. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah, Phineas Newborn. Yeah, I discovered Phineas when I don't remember when I first heard him, but I remember kind of digging in when I got to school and just kind of, reminiscent of Oscar in certain ways, but then in other ways not so much. I mean, he definitely had just the virtuosity is unbelievable. Like the virtuosity of, both hands, left hand, right hand, playing songs with only the left hand and all these things. And I just remember just hearing him to solo piano. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Um, to be able to hear someone with that level of genius and understanding of the instrument, because sometimes the instrument to me is so overwhelming. Personally, to me, I always say I feel more like a jazz musician than a pianist. And this just happens to be the instrument through which I express the music and my feelings, but I'm not sure how much I identified as a pianist, So when I hear someone who I feel like is super meant to be behind the instrument, I'm so drawn to them because there's so much that I want to learn from listening to them. And Phineas is one of those people where I just listen to recordings like, oh my God, I don't know how. First of all, how he's able to do that? That's the first question I ask. And then how did he think of that is the other thing, you know? So he's one of my biggest influences, absolutely.
Now, with your composition, I have seen in some of your interviews where you talk about, and I'm going to use the word percolate, that you take a while with your compositions. You like to have time pass and let them simmer and percolate, and continue working on them until you feel like you're at a point where it's is it ever finished, I guess is my question.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, they probably never are done, you know. I was just talking to someone about Duke, and Duke was writing and writing and fixing until it was time to record it. And even after recording, he's still changing it, you know. So um I guess I mean, there's definitely a certain time where I will not play something um unless it's gotten to a certain point. I'm like, I cannot perform this until I feel at least get to this point, you know. And then past then, maybe I'll continue to work on it and work on it. And then if it serves its purpose, then I can leave it as it is, you know, and then write something else and move on.
But the beauty of jazz music is the fact that you can call it ready, right? But
Oh,
and every time you play it, it's going to be different.
true.
So
Absolutely
there you
true.
have that flexibility. In one of the interviews previously, I had talked about I am a writer, and Stephen King wrote a book about writing, and his um, one of the hardest things that he suggests that one does, and it applies for any of the arts, music, painting, any arts, where you write or play without self editor. And you just get it out, and then you take it and you put it in a drawer and you leave it there for 6 months, and then you come back to it and you revisit it. And I think for me, that's always been very hard, but it was a really good exercise for me to try. And I'm just curious if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I've done that. You know, I know a lot of musicians, it's not, you know, specific to me. I know a lot of musicians have thousands of voice memos on their phone. And I have my fair share of those. Just, you know, I played something, I was working on something for a few hours or whatever, and I just put it away. And then, you know, every once in a while, you know, maybe 3 years later, I'll be like, hey, what is this? And I'll listen to it. And I'm like, oh, you know, I could use that, you know, or no, I can't use that, you know. But yeah, I definitely have tried to do that in my own way every once in a while.
How do you go through all those voice memos? Because for me, with my writing, I put them on pieces of paper and then I tend to put them in a box and then it's just a big mess. And then I don't know what I've got. And then I'll look at something
Right.
I can't read and I'm like, what does that mean? Is it the same?
Yeah, generally it's a mess. Yeah, I started to get a little bit better about, you know, actually titling them in some way, even if it's saying like unfinished or something, and I'll go, you know, try and visit it. But generally, like, yeah, it's a mess most times.
Now, when you're composing, are you thinking about what type of or what size band will be performing it, be it a trio or a quartet or an orchestra? Does that come into play early on, or does that come into play later?
I generally write for quartet because that's what I enjoy performing. That's the setting I enjoy most performing in. At least for me, like if I'm being presented somewhere. So that's generally what I hear. And I try to keep in mind who's playing also. Um, yeah, that's just something I try to do. And I know I've heard, you know, in history, a lot of musicians have done that. They try to keep specific people in mind. If they know who's playing it, they try to keep those people in mind. I know Monk has some recordings and some of his compositions where I know like some notes are really difficult wherever he wrote them on the horn. And he's like, well, I wrote it there on purpose to get this certain sound, you know, so he's being that specific about his writing. I try to do that the best that I can, but generally, because I love to accompany Julian, who generally plays me. Julian Lee plays saxophone generally in my band, and I think about him a lot, and I like to accompany him, and comping is one of my favorite one of my favorite parts of the music. And so I think about that. I think about the four people kind of personnel. I think about the quartet setting a lot when I write.
Do you want to try to write for anything larger, a quintet, a septet, a nonet orchestra?
Yeah, I wrote some things for quintet, which were fine, I thought, and I've written for orchestra before. I thought it was fine. I think I definitely would love to refine it if I was ever going to try to record or something like that. But yeah, I have written for large ensembles.
Now, when what in an interview that you did with Neon Jazz Interviews, you were defining jazz and you called it an elaboration of the blues. Do you want to expand on that?
Is that what I said? That's what I said. Um, yeah, I think I think that definition probably comes from a lot of my mentors, and um, yeah, I think it elaborates on the feeling. I think a lot of times jazz can, in my opinion, this is my opinion. I think a lot of times jazz can become just kind of a dumpster for instrumental music that we can't explain or and that's not to exclude vocalists obviously, but it just becomes that thing, and I feel like at a certain point it just becomes, oh, anything can be this. And so a lot of times I mean, there's a lot of influences and things that people can do with the music, like like the songbook is important, the American songbook is important. Obviously the roots in New Orleans is super important, and but I think the blues aspect of it is so important. And I think sometimes that's what unintentionally gets left out because we like to define it by all these other things. I think the root of it is the blues. That's what makes it the sound that it is, and I think that jazz just harmonically and through the swing and all these things, it elaborates on the feeling of the blues, right? And there's more harmonic things that are happening within the music. And I think if you keep the essence of what it is, you keep the blues, and that's super important, that's at the core of the music, then you have a better chance of what I would consider jazz, of playing what I've considered jazz. And unfortunately, it ends up being left out a lot. It just, in my opinion.
So, in the foundation of your education, then, were you taught then the blues as a building block to jazz?
I think yeah, as I continued to study, I think that was definitely one of the defining aspects of the music that I was taught. Yeah.
But perhaps it needs to be emphasized even more.
I you know, I believe so. I think sometimes it's like fighting someone that you can't see, because that's not something that is, on the audience's mind all the time. They shouldn't necessarily have to think about that either. Um, but I think sometimes when you think of the music jazz, I don't know if we always have the correct picture. I remember one of my teachers uh at Juilliard, he was super concerned with how we conceive the things in our mind. He was asking us, okay, when I say C major, like what are you picturing? And some of us say, oh, the way it looks on a piano or way. And he was like, no, like he had a certain way that he wanted you to be thinking about it in your mind, and that's super important to the way that it kind of came out, and whatever it was you were composing or whatever it was you're performing or what you were doing, he thought it was super important. And so I think the same thing. I think it's super important about how we think about it. I think it's important to understand why it's maybe connected to the culture, why it deserves to be experienced and to live. Um, and yeah, like I said, that blues is super important to the identity of the music and the culture.
Do you have you taught before, or do you have aspirations to teach?
That's a great question. I have taught before. Yeah, I think I would, like, in the future. I'd love to do that. And it's funny because I there are so many scholars and people that know so much and that I learn from them. I'm always, I'm 27, so I never want to. come out pretending like I like there aren't people much wiser and more experienced than me. So I have a funny relationship with entertaining the idea of doing it when I know that there's someone more qualified, per se, to do that. But I would love to, I think in the future, do more of it. Absolutely.
That's the beauty, though, of jazz, especially, is it's built on so many building blocks, for lack of a better term, of great musicians and great genres within it. It's almost like a river. The river, it has its origin point, but it's always going to continue to flow. So at this point in the river was Duke Ellington. At this point in the river was Oscar Peterson, and now we're at the point of the river where there's J. Thompson, and you're going to continue going forward, and there's going to be new people coming into this water, and it's all a big mix. Is that an analogy that works?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. As long as we remember where the river comes from. Yeah, where it started, you know, at least in my opinion. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you had also spoken in an interview about your ability to learn from an institution such as Juilliard, but also the great learning that comes on the bandstand.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, there's some things that can't be taught. I think, and that's not a fault of any teacher. There's just some things that just cannot be. I think there are things that you just have to learn when it's time to perform. It's time to perform. It's different. There's like these jitters and things that when you have to actually do it, it's very different. And Yeah, I think that's uh kind of hard. I remember someone pointing that out to me. When you're a new student, you have the earliest classes, but when you're just starting to play, you usually play the latest sets. That's just how it goes, at least in this current culture. So that makes it particularly difficult for you when you're first starting out, to play 1 in the morning and then have the 8 a.m. class, So it doesn't always support each other in that way, but it does support in other ways because I found that I learned a lot from my peers at school, and my teachers. I just learned there was just so much. um, um, Everyone knew a lot, and everyone personalized the information in a different way. And I felt particularly I had an extraordinary grade of musicians, that I was able to learn from and apply that on gigs, and performances. So I was super lucky.
So you're giving me a nice segue to my question that I have written down here is, are there many opportunities for young musicians to learn on the bandstand? As you pointed out, there are the late night gigs, but you have a lot of musicians that are up and coming, and there's only a limited amount of clubs in New York City or clubs in this area. I mean, I'm proud to say that at the library here, we make sure to highlight an ensemble from William Patterson's jazz program every fall and every spring in our jazz series here. And that was a really big part of our having our jazz series, was to say, let's give the students a place to play. But in reality, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is really difficult. Yeah, I will not lie. It is very difficult, to find places to play. I think, there's a lot of musicians. There's not a lot of venues. I mean, just in comparison to the amount of people who want to play, and I think that's just one of the hardest things to figure out how to navigate, you know. But I also try not to be so specific about it just being a part of this culture because I think it happens with lots of other vocations and occupations too. you know and for me, that's what we were talking about earlier. I'm, like I said, I'm so not competitive. So what I try to do was I tried to be me, the best that I could be, and I hope that that would put me in the situations that I was called to be in, as opposed to trying to compete for a space that maybe I wasn't supposed to be in anyway. So that's the way I try to look at it. It doesn't make it necessarily much easier, but I think at least it gives me the right perspective on the issue.
So one of the things that you have been able to do is have residencies at Mesro and Smoke too, right?
Yeah, yeah. This was in 20, I believe 19 or 18. I think 2019, and I was playing a lot at, like you said, it's at Smoke and Metro, and I was really grateful for that opportunity. I was able to write a lot during that time and really kind of practice seeing like what works, what doesn't work, and I got a lot of experience forming set lists and playing with different people and yeah, I was super grateful to kind of develop in that way, and also for the clubs giving me and trusting me with that. I mean, that's you have to trust a musician with that space if they're going to frequent your establishment. So very thankful.
Do you think so? The time frame you're talking about was pre-pandemic. So do you think the pandemic forcing us into a virtual world gave more opportunities to up and coming musicians around the world to be able to showcase their talents in a virtual way, or was it harder,
I
or
I,
both?
yeah, I mean, I think in certain ways it helped. I think in certain ways, we were kind of going that way. We were kind of going more online anyway, and that kind of just really kind of catapulted, us, our culture into that. And so I think I've seen a lot of people have a lot of success doing things online. However, I know that there was this void. It feels like in a lot of people, there's going to be, you want to be around other people. You miss playing for people. I mean, that's something I still, every time I get out on stage, I'm like, thank you for being here. It's nice to see your face in person. And I think in certain ways it did isolate a lot of musicians too, even more so because, it's taking, we're still kind of coming out of it. Things aren't the way that they were. So even before, there's less opportunities now, I would imagine. So I think that really it did create even maybe more of an issue for musicians and young musicians such as myself. But I think it did give us perspective, and it has taught a lot of us how to be more of our own person. Like, how can I make stuff happen? How can I do this online? How can I do this virtually? How can I do it in person? How, and I think we've learned a lot from that time.
It must have been very challenging to be a student during the pandemic and really how do you hone your skills in a time where you can't really be around others. So did that affect your schooling at all?
Yeah, it was towards the end of my time at school, and especially, and there's no one you can blame for that. I mean, no one knew what to do really. I mean, it was, I was at the end of my time, and we were still figuring that out. I know later on people got a lot better at understanding how that functions to do school online that way, but we were just really trying to figure it out, especially at a performing arts institution. That's really difficult. Um, so yeah, I mean, I was thankful to have the time um, that I did before that happened, but it also did give me an understanding of what people had to go through after. I can say like, yeah, I kind of know a little bit of what that feels like. Yeah.
So one of the things that I would like to ask is, how did you and John Pizzarelli hook up to be performing for so many years together and touring? How did that
Sure.
all come to be?
Yeah, he was Jazz House Kids was doing an event at the Jacob Burns um center, and John Pizzarelli was going to be there, and I can't remember why we were there at the same time. I know we were both performing, but I'm not exactly sure the title of the function. And I was maybe 16 or something. And he said, I mean, I remember meeting him, but I didn't think that he would remember me or anything like that. So I remember playing, and I remember meeting him very briefly. And then it was only in 2019 that I remember getting a message or an email saying that he was looking for a pianist, and that he remembered me. Well, he had asked he had asked around for for recommendations, and I was one of the names on the list, and he had remembered me from when I was 16, you know, and I played a few gigs with him, and then it just kind of kept going, and so it's been a number of years now. So yeah, that's really been an amazing. He's such an amazing guy, an amazing mentor in so many ways. I learned from him as a musician, also as a man. He's just a really great person to be around to learn from.
He truly is, as he presents himself. He's very genuine and nice, and like we were saying with Bill Charlap and Christian McBride, willing to help anybody who is showing an interest, and he's funny. He's very funny.
He is not, I always say it's not an act, it's how he is all the time. That's just him. It's completely genuine, like you said.
So as we come to the end of this interview, I just want to say how excited I am that we'll be able to hear you perform June 23rd here in Wayne. It's going to be the collaboration with the Jazz Series and the Wayne Public Library at Our Lady of Consolation Church. 4 o'clock Sunday, June 23rd. I am beyond thrilled. And you're performing with your trio.
Correct, correct.
Do we know who the musicians are that you're playing with?
Very soon. Very soon. You'll know very soon.
To be announced. By the way, I just want to end this interview with a nice nickname somebody has given to you. You have quite a collection of hats
Oh,
that I admire in all your different pictures and your performances. And so I guess someone has given you the name the Cat in the Hat.
okay, I'll take it. I think Greg Reporter might already have that, but I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah.
You might have to get copyright from the Dr. Seuss Wood.
Right, right.
Unless somebody gives you that nickname. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time. We'll see you on June 23rd. And yeah, let's see where your whole career goes with planning and not planning.
Right. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you very soon.